Welcome to Bluegrass Brooklyn, our podcast all about the music we love, straight from the Bluegrass borough of Brooklyn, New York.
Come on back, sweet mama, back where you belong. 'Cause I gambled over town and found that I can't win. Come on back and pick me up again. Now if I lose, let me lose. I don't care how much I lose.
Hello, and thank you for listening to Season 5, Episode 2 of our Bluegrass Brooklyn podcast. My name is Liz Wolfe.
And I'm Mike Wilner.
And today we have a special guest, Ira Gitlin, and you will learn about some very interesting bluegrass history and what he has been up to in his musical world. So we're very excited for that. But before we get to that, what do you have going on, Mike?
Well, we asked ourselves the question, what does Brooklyn need? And the answer is yet another bluegrass jam. So we started a weekly jam on Monday nights at Irish Haven in Sunset Park, 58th Street and 4th Avenue. We start at 7 and we go till 9:30 or 10 or so. It's a great venue, a lot of fun. Please, if you're in the area, come on down. Also, I'm getting ready for a trip in March. I'm headed down to Cajun country. I'm going to Lafayette, Louisiana. Gonna hang around, gonna visit music venues, fiddle with as many Cajun fiddlers as I can find, visit local music shops and other points of interest, and gather information for a future episode. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. What about you, Liz?
Well, you're going to hear a fair amount in this interview, and I wanted to mention it before you listen, about a Wernick method class that happens in Silver Bay, New York. That's on Lake George. And this camp is special because it is run by Pete Wernick himself. And of course, Austin Scelzo is the co-director of the camp. It's on Lake George. It's a full week. He's got amazing instructors, one of whom is Ira. And I will be there because it's one of the most special camps that you can go to.
Liz, that sounds great. When's it going to be?
That is the last week in August, and it's a beautiful venue right there on Lake George.
Lovely.
So that's happening. And of course, you won't be surprised to hear me promoting Jam Jersey again. We are very close to it, just a little bit over a month away. We've got some awesome workshops, some awesome jams scheduled. So I want to also mention that you can come just for the day, just Friday night or just Saturday. And those tickets are now on sale, just day tickets. So you can get your tickets, and the more we know you're coming, the better prepared we can be.
Great. Okay, so please remember to follow us at Bluegrass Brooklyn. Brooklyn is spelled BKLYN. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email mike@bluegrassbrooklyn.com. So, Liz, anything else?
No, let's get going with our interview.
Great. So let's roll.
Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Today's guest is Ira Gitlin. He is a performer. He's a teacher. He is a historian. He's a writer. He lives in the Washington, D.C. area, but I have just learned that he comes from the ancestral lands of Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. Is that right, Ira?
Well, that's where my mother grew up back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, yeah.
Okay. So I brought Ira on because I know him. I met him originally at the Silver Bay camp up in Silver Bay, New York, which is a Wernick camp that Pete Wernick runs. We've talked about that on previous episodes. And Ira is not only a wonderful Wernick instructor and instrument instructor, he's also the man that is getting me in trouble because I now have a t-shirt that says, I would have a bass if I didn't have a husband. Because Ira had an elective at the Silver Bay camp that was entitled, You Should Play the Bass. And I went. And I felt like Helen Keller on that day. You know, when Helen Keller learns that the hand signals mean water, it was like he showed me that you could play anything in the key of D, and suddenly you were a bass player. So I thank you for that, for making such a big difference in my life.
Well, it was my pleasure. Always is.
So give us a little bit more of that history of how you came to be a musician and living in Washington, D.C. and your New York roots.
Okay, well, my parents figured that learning some musical instrument should be a part of every kid's education. So I and my younger brother and my older sister all took music lessons, and it was up to us what instrument we wanted. And I think my mother might have steered me towards a folk guitar class at the local Y, which I took when I was in 5th grade. And somehow music just made sense to me. Even before I started playing guitar, I would sit at our piano and just try different things out. And once I got started playing guitar, I had a friend in junior high school who was also starting around the same time, and we'd hang out and borrow his big sister's Tom Paxton and Peter, Paul and Mary records and figure out songs. And now this is kind of a stereotype for guys my age, but when I was a teenager, I saw the movie Deliverance with that great dueling banjos scene. And it was very striking. It's a powerful movie, so it resonated with me. And shortly after that, the guy I knew from summer camp, I saw him playing dueling banjos on the banjo. And I don't usually think like this, but I remember thinking, I play guitar as well as he does, so if he can play banjo, I guess I can too. And I strung up my guitar like a banjo. I went to the library, I got the Pete Seeger book. I made myself a crude banjo out of a scratch of wood and a cookie tin. I still have it. It's totally unplayable. And, I just muddled around. I eventually got a real banjo, kept playing while I was in college. I had a band. We weren't very good, but a lot of fun, good friendships. And then when I was in grad school for classical studies, I was getting more and more dissatisfied with my schooling, and I was getting more and more interested in playing music more seriously than I had been. So I left grad school. A few years later, I moved down to DC because I knew there was a pretty lively bluegrass scene in DC. So I've been down in DC ever since, and I've met people, and I spent a bunch of months unemployed listening to WAMU hours a day, and that really did wonders for my knowledge of the music.
So you have a specific interest in history of bluegrass, and I know that because at the Silver Bay camp every morning you did a come on down and find out more about the history of bluegrass. Now, I'll admit I'm the person that stays up until 2 or 3 in the mornings.
Yes, you were not going to get up any earlier than you had to. I can totally relate.
Although I remember you being one of those people jamming that late too. So, however, tell us a little bit more about where your interest in history of all this music came.
I've always read a lot, and I've always been interested in history in general. So, of course, as I got into bluegrass, I started learning more about that. And I'll put in a plug for anybody who's at all interested who has not yet gotten Neil Rosenberg's book. You really should. It's called Bluegrass, A History. Came out in the 1980s. And I remember going to see Neil when he was making the rounds, doing presentations when the book came out. And I've read that book over and over, and there's a 20th anniversary edition came out in 2005 that has a long preface about all the developments in bluegrass since the book was first published, and it talks about Alison Krauss and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and all sorts of stuff like that. So I just read that. I would read Bluegrass Unlimited every month, banjo newsletter usually, and it just something about the way my mind works. It files away information in ways that I can retrieve it.
That interest has taken you into a project where you are actually writing a book about the Johnson Mountain Boys.
Yeah, and that's something I started working on. I guess I first got the idea in 2018, and the following year I started working on it seriously. The Johnson Mountain Boys is one of these bands that, if you're getting into bluegrass just now, you might never have heard of. But they were huge. They were one of the top acts on the circuit in the 1980s and into the 1990s. And they were, I think, the band that really showed people that young musicians with all of that youthful energy could play hardcore traditional bluegrass at a time when other people their age, in their teens and in their 20s, were mostly going for more eclectic, progressive kind of bluegrass. These guys were like the second coming of the Stanley Brothers. But at the time, the older generation, Bill Monroe, Lester Flagg, those guys, they were not projecting that energy that they had been a couple of decades earlier when they were younger. So it was a real revelation to fans of traditional bluegrass to see these guys doing it superlatively well. And the younger fans were introduced to this stuff for the first time. The older fans were thinking, oh, these nice, clean-cut young men playing the stuff that I remember from 1950. And you have to see what they were like live. And there's a lot of video of them up on YouTube now, including this concert of theirs that was made into a live album. But you get to see professionally produced video footage of it.
Wow.
And it's fantastic. It's from Luckett's, Virginia in 1988, if that helps anybody search for it.
So note to self, Johnson Mountain Boys, put that on your YouTube watch list, or presumably they've got some things that are on Apple Music or wherever you listen. So what was inspiring to you such that you would devote a portion of your life to writing a book about them?
Oh man, that sounds really serious when you put it that way, a portion of my life. Well, I love them from the time I first heard them in the early 80s. And I actually got to play bass for a few gigs with them. They stopped touring full-time in 88, but within a year or so, they were playing again on a much reduced schedule. And it was during that period, in 1994, that Marshall Wilborn, who was a member of the band at one time, wasn't able to do a few gigs. And they knew me just from the local scene, so I got to play bass with them, and that was an absolutely high point. So I know all those guys. Yeah. They're all alive. Most of them are local. And it just seemed like I wanted to write to make some contribution to the bluegrass historical literature. And this seemed like a topic that they were important. I knew from knowing them personally that there would be some pretty good interviews. And it seemed like it was a manageable topic. Was I going to do like the history of bluegrass in New York? Well, that's something covering 6 decades. Nothing like that. I could see my way through to finishing it once I started it.
That's great. I mean, I love that there are opportunities to still communicate and have interviews with and find out a bit more closer to the original of bluegrass and being on the scene at that time, which I was around for, but I didn't really pay attention to. On my college campus, the Ramones came, but no bluegrass.
And the Ramones, I mean, that's historically as important as the Johnson Mountain Boys, I would say, for their music. Do you know Kevin Slick? He's a photographer and a graphic artist and a musician. I quote him. He compared the Johnson Mountain Boys and their impact when they hit the scene. He compared them to the Ramones. The idea was that they were channeling this old school energy, doing it in a somewhat newer way. And I thought that was a really interesting take on it. That this kind of thing happens in every style of music. You get to a certain point when the style has been around long enough, it develops a back to basics movement. We've had that in jazz, we've had it in rock, so it's pervasive in culture in general.
You couldn't really call the Ramones bluegrass adjacent. So I heard you talking about playing the bass with the Johnson Mountain Boys. So clearly you made the move from guitar to banjo, and then at some point bass came in to your life. So tell us about that.
Well, you may have picked up on this. There's really relatively few people who play bass who started out playing bass. Usually they move over to bass because they know their music and somebody they're playing with needs a bass player. Like Missy Raines actually started out as a bass player. That's kind of rare. But Marshall Wilborn, if any of your listeners are not familiar with Marshall, he's from Texas. He moved east in the 80s, played with various bands, including the Johnson Mountain Boys, played with his wife, Lynn Morris, for a bunch of years until she had her stroke. And it's played with Michael Cleveland. He's a great bass player. He started out as a banjo player, and he just started playing bass because he was playing with guys, and there was another banjo player in the bunch, and they wanted a bass. The thing is, if you know your music, and especially if you know guitar, it's easy to get a handle on bass because, for your listeners who might not know, the 4 strings of a bass, E, A, D, G, those are the same as the 4 lowest strings of the guitar, just an octave lower. And in bluegrass, if you think about what the guitar does, boom, boom, it does a lot of that alternating bass. So if you're doing that on guitar already, it's relatively easy to figure out how to do it on bass. So that's how I got started when I was in college. It was some guys I was playing with, and on one occasion, they needed somebody to play bass with them. And you must have had a similar experience at Silver Bay, right? Because you started out on guitar, right?
Correct. I own a U bass, but I don't own an upright. And that's the joke in my house. It's like I would have a bass if I didn't have a husband. The fact is, I do live in New York City. And so I'm not going to carry a upright bass around in New York City. I love having the opportunity to play it whenever I can, get just as much satisfaction from playing the little electric bass when I can. You know, it's a funny thing about the bass in that you can't have more than one, and sometimes you wish you had one. So it's hard to find that balance, I think, between you're at, let's say, IBMA or at any jam, and then, oh, we don't have a bass player, and you're always trying to entice the bass players over. But if one more bass player comes along, you're like, don't want you, don't want you. So that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. To me, it doesn't seem like it's really a band unless there's a bass there. That's the final piece of the puzzle.
So you're still in a band, Big Howdy. What's that all about?
Okay, well, that's a DC area band. We occasionally played outside the DC area, but mainly around here. And it was built around two singers, Dee Dee Wyland, who some of you, especially your New York listeners, may remember from Tony Trischka and Skyline, which she played with back in the 80s. But also a good friend of mine, Randy Barrett. He's a really good singer, but he's a great songwriter. He plays guitar and banjo. I play bass. Dee Dee plays rhythm guitar. And another fella, Tom McLaughlin, a longtime music partner of Randy's, plays mandolin and some lead guitar. So we have a lot of things that feature Dee Dee singing, some really good vocal duet stuff between Dee Dee and Randy, a lot of Randy's original songs, which I jokingly, you've heard the term 3 chords and the truth. Well, Randy's are like 6 or 7 chords and the truth. They tend to be complex, but in very satisfying ways. But some of them can get really deep emotionally, and she's just a great songwriter. And we work really hard on our vocals. I usually do the lowest harmony part, baritone or low tenor. You know, the scene here is not what it was 40 years ago as far as number of places to play. But we were fortunate to have gotten a monthly gig at a place here in Rockville, Maryland, first Saturday of every month. And every time we do it, we have a guest artist. Sometimes they're local people. Sometimes they're people who are nationally known. Well, this coming one, Alice Gerard, is going to be our guest.
Wow.
You know, Bluegrass Hall of Fame. She came to prominence in her duo with Hazel Dickens in the 60s. And she's 91 years old. She's still singing great. And she just recently moved back up to Maryland from North Carolina. So we're really proud to have her. So by having a regular thing, we're getting people to know who we are, but we're also having a special guest. It makes it something of a happening and not just a regular gig.
So I understand you are working on an album together as a band.
Yeah. It's going to be out on the Patuxent Music label.
So we're going to look for that, and we will definitely promote that when that comes out.
I don't know what it's going to be called, but the band is Big Howdy.
So you're also a teacher. I know I've learned a lot from you, not only about the bass, but singing. And when I was at Silver Bay, we had a band, and you really gave us a lot of wonderful guidance around singing, the harmonies. So tell us about your teaching.
Yeah, and that's mostly what I do during the week is private lessons. A lot of banjo, some guitar. Every now and then I'll get a bass student. During the pandemic, of course, that switched completely to online. And that expands my reach. I can teach somebody anywhere. But that's kind of neat. The amazing thing about the technology is that pretty much anybody anywhere in the world could be taking lessons from anybody else anywhere in the world.
This is a personal opinion, which is that there are many, many amazing, wonderful musicians out there, very talented people, love to watch them play. They're not so great at teaching, actually. So I think it's something of a rare, and that's not to diss anybody, but it's a little bit of a rare thing to have somebody who has skill and performance skills and teaching skills. So I feel like you fall into that category.
Well, thanks. And, you know, I think as a writer, I've written a lot for Bluegrass Unlimited, Banjo Newsletter, some other niche publications. And I think some of the skills are the same. You have to put yourself in your reader's shoes and figure out what are my assumptions that I'm assuming that I can't assume the reader knows. And when you start thinking like that, then you're thinking like a teacher. It's like, yeah, I perfectly understand why this note is here and, where I have to go to play it and what kind of right-hand roll to use. But this is not obvious to a beginner or possibly an intermediate student. So you have to figure out what the limits of their knowledge are, what their learning style is, and how you can spin the information so that it'll make sense. One thing I remember, I was just starting to get serious about bluegrass, was reading a Stelling banjo ad in Bluegrass Unlimited. It said something about a particular model that Little Roy himself did. And I remember, at the time, I didn't know who the Lewis family was or who Little Roy Lewis was. And I remember thinking, I don't know who this Little Roy guy is, but obviously whoever wrote this expects me to know who it is, so it must be somebody important. And if I'm writing about bluegrass for a non-bluegrass audience, I might have to identify Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass, call him that or something like that. For a bluegrass readership, I don't need to do that. But there's all this stuff that's in the middle. Maybe they're not as towering figures like Bill Monroe, but if somebody just talks about a flathead banjo, and you're not a banjo player, you might not even have a clue what that refers to or why people would prefer that to an archtop banjo, which you also don't have a clue about. Right. So I'd have to go into a little explanation about banjo construction and banjo tone and which players preferred which. And I try to keep it to a minimum, but just enough to get everybody on the same page to where they know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, people know less than we think they do, and would concur that making those assumptions, it happens in jamming also.
Yeah, but I'd also say if you're writing about it or if you're saying it face-to-face in a lesson, you also want to figure out a way to say it in such a way that it doesn't sound like you're talking down to them. I happen to know this and you don't, but that's okay, you're learning, and just present the information to them without condescending.
Yes, I call that jam-splaining.
Yeah. And I tend to be guilty of that partly because I teach so much. So at Silver Bay, I'm there the whole week and I'm jamming, but it's also understood that I'm an instructor and I have a certain stature to make suggestions. And I got to watch it when I'm not in the instructional setting.
Yes, I can relate to that. If I'm leading a jam, it's one thing. If I'm not leading the jam, I have to be careful not to say, whose turn is it now? Who's going? Because
yeah.
a little bit crazy. So as a teacher, do you have a specific practice tip that you see that is commonly needed?
Interesting. I think any practice tips that I say are important are going to be things that people have heard many other teachers say many other times. What can I say? Slow it down until you're sure you're playing it right before you try speeding it up. If you keep making a mistake, slow it down until you've got control. Remember in driver's ed, they would talk about outdriving your headlights at night, where the throw of your headlights, if it's longer than the braking distance at the speed that you're traveling at, it's dangerous because something will show up in the beam of your headlights. And even if you instantaneously step on the brake, you're not going to stop on time.
I never heard that. Maybe
Okay,
because
I remember that. I think I remember
maybe
that.
because I never took driver's ed.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. But you've got the concept, right? Yeah. It's possible to drive too fast for you to be able to react appropriately.
Yes.
Especially at night where it's just limited by what your headlights show. And it's the same thing. If you're playing too fast for you to monitor the fine motions of your hand that you still haven't fully internalized, the result is going to be you're going to keep making mistakes. And you slow it down as much as you have to until you can play it evenly, smoothly, in time, all the right notes and none of the wrong notes. All the right notes in the right order, none of the wrong notes. That's the one that comes to my mind right away. But the one big one, and it's surprising how many students have not ever tried to do this, is find a melody on your instrument. Doesn't have to be a bluegrass melody, just a TV commercial you remember from when you were a kid, or Happy Birthday, or just something. Can you play that melody on your instrument? Not a fancy thing with chords, just the melody like you would sing it. And I'm always amazed at how many people have never tried that. And they like music enough to get an instrument. They were interested enough in playing to contact the teacher and to pay money for lessons. And yet it never occurred to them that happy birthday is right there on the instrument. And from when I was a kid, I was always doing this, first at the piano before I took music lessons, then on the guitar. And I think it's an essential musical skill because it creates and solidifies the connection between the sounds you hear in your head, the places on the instrument where those sounds can be found, and what your hands have to do to get from one to the other. So it will improve every aspect of your musicianship. If you haven't done that, this is my appeal to your listeners. If you haven't done that, try it. And if you have trouble with it, contact me. I can show you what to do.
And we will have Ira's contact information. Do you have a website?
Yeah, I do. It's iragitlin.com.
Oh, that's easy.
What do you think the odds were that wasn't going to be taken?
Well, lizwolf.com has definitely been taken. There are an amazingly large number of Liz Wolfs in this world. Well, Ira, wonderful to chat with you. Always good to connect with you. And in general, yes, reach out to Ira if you're looking for any kind of instrument instruction, especially guitar, banjo, or bass. And let's see what happens when your album comes out with Dee Dee Weiland. And other than that, it's always great to connect with you and hear what interesting things you have to say. I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure, Liz. See you down the road.
Well, Mike, you and I just got back from the Joe Val Festival, which was held up at Framingham, Mass, for those folks that are listening that do not know. So this is a festival recap. Mike and I thought we could reflect on some of our amazing experiences while we were at Joe Val.
Yeah, it was a tremendous amount of fun. Just for the listeners' context, Joe Val is a hotel takeover festival. The entire conference level of the hotel is taken over with jamming rooms and with workshops and all kinds of seminars. And there's a main stage also and headliners. But the real headliner for me and the entire festival, Liz, was you.
Yes. Well, that was a huge thrill. So I noticed in the email that the Boston Bluegrass Union put out beforehand for the lineup and everything that was happening, that there was going to be bluegrass karaoke. And the bluegrass karaoke was going to have Allison Brown on banjo, Missy Raines on bass, Michael Daves on guitar, Stuart Duncan on fiddle, and Matt Flinner on mandolin.
Yeah, that was an incredible band. And by the way, you sounded incredible. We posted some videos of it, and it seemed like a tremendous amount of fun. And I had so much fun watching and listening.
Yeah, and that was just the start of some really amazing performances. And what I always love about the bluegrass karaoke type of thing is that the folks that we're playing with in the hallways, but then they get a chance to get up there and really have some fun with some high quality musicians.
Besides the obvious highlight, what else sticks in your mind about the festival, Liz?
Well, as I just mentioned, there was a lot of jamming. I love playing with people that I've never played with before. And I also love that I played with people last year and I remember them. And so we get together in these different combinations. And not only do they have the jams in the conference rooms downstairs, but there's a lot of hallway jamming. There's my favorite, which is elevator bay jamming. And the reason why that's the most fun is because you're there on the elevator bay in the little area there outside the elevator. And as people get off, they see what's happening and they join in. So that is a great way to bring new people in. And I met some really great pickers and singers that way.
Yeah, everywhere you went, there was more music and so much fun. I spent a lot of time jamming and playing, but my favorite jam memory was towards the end of the festival. A couple of us were sitting in the room playing. It was a directed jam, which means they have like recent Berklee College of Music graduates and other musicians come in and just sit in the jam room to lead and make sure things progress. So the leader in that room happened to be a fiddle player. No secret, my fiddle bias. So we were chatting about double stops and intonation when in walks Grandpa, Dad, and 9-year-old Rosie, who's been playing fiddle a year. And they sat down. She sat next to me and we just started playing and calling tunes, and we were all encouraging her. She called some tunes, and if she ran out of tunes, we just asked, what songs do you like? And we played those. And then at some point, the break came around to me, and I said, triple fiddle. So me and the leader and Rosie all played together. So really a wonderful memory. It was great to see the beginning of a musical journey that I hope for her sake lasts a lifetime. And by the way, Dad and Grandpa were very encouraging and supportive, no pressure, no, stage dad, anything. So that was great.
I had my own youth encounter. I got to play with Leopold, who is a young and upcoming mandolin player, and he has there's a whole family of musicians there. And he has an older brother, Isaac, and he's well known in the banjo world now. And Leopold just turned out to be the sweetest kid. And I don't mean that in any kind of demeaning way. He was so eager to play with us. He was our favorite elevator bay drop-in. Like, he'd get off the elevator and he would play, and just really great kid, and really very good mandolin player, like better than a lot of the adults standing in the room.
I had a little side quest there. Again, fiddle players can't help this. There was a shop in the vicinity called Bridges and Bows. And I had somehow convinced myself that one of my fiddles needed an adjustment, which it actually turned out to need. And oh my goodness, some beautiful instruments ranging from the $200 or $300 student instrument to the $20,000 to $30,000 fine orchestral instruments. But they were so friendly, helpful. And when one of the instruments actually needed some work that would take time, they accommodated me by, rather than trying to keep it overnight, which would not have worked, they said, well, go have lunch. We'll fix it by the time you get back. So, hey, well done there, Bridges and Bows. We'll put some information about you guys in our program notes.
Well, you're a brave man for leaving the campus, because I don't think I even went outside one single time that entire weekend, except to head out to my car to pick something up.
I just felt the need to indulge my fiddleness. Speaking of fiddleness, there were some incredibly great fiddle players in the shows. And of course, we do our Mount Rushmore question. You're familiar with that, Liz? If you had to make a 4-person mountain out of your favorite ex-fiddle players, guitar players, singers, who would they be? And it's a tough question because nobody has 4 favorites. Everyone has 40 favorites. But we speak to a lot of nationally and internationally known musicians here, especially fiddle players, and I'd say every one of them, or almost every one of them, put Stuart Duncan on their list. And Stuart was there. We sat in a workshop with him where he demonstrated playing and talked about fiddle things. Just sort of, sometimes learning is not so much, hey, I'm going to learn a tune. It's just sort of sitting, watching, and absorbing the vibe. And that's what I felt like we were doing. And of course, listening to him play. So that was another big standout for me.
And my big standout celebrity experience was being with the Gibson brothers in a small room.
Wow.
It was a songwriting workshop, or at least that's what the title was. They did talk about songwriting, but they weren't really teaching about it. Basically, what they did was they opened it up for questions. And many of those questions were, can you play this particular song right now? So they spent a lot of the hour like giving us a private concert, basically. And their harmonies are just so tight. And to me, really a band to look to learn about harmonies. And the good news is at the end of the workshop, I went over and I got their contact information so I can invite them to be on the podcast.
I just want to make sure the listeners fully appreciate. So that was Gibson Brothers in the workshop, and that was Stuart Duncan in the workshop. But there were workshops all day. There's about a dozen rooms or more, and several of them at any hour of the day had something like that going on. So there was so much activity, and there were lots and lots of people. And I just want to point out that for the jams, they have, let's say there's 8 rooms or 10 rooms with jams. Here's the old time advanced, here's the bluegrass beginner, bluegrass intermediate. So it's sort of like playing Dungeons and Dragons, except with bluegrass, because you're going from room to room. And it was absolutely a totally musically enriching experience. Enjoyed tremendously.
And just so that everyone knows, Mike and I went to Jam Val last year. They didn't have any performances, but they had jamming. And we did a recap episode of that. So you can go back to a previous episode and you can listen and find out more about the Joe Val / Jam Val history.
Yeah, scan season 1. I don't remember exactly which episode that was. This Joe Val was also special to a lot of people because for several years, especially since COVID, it had been a jam Val, meaning they didn't have headliners, they didn't have bands really, they just had jamming. Not just, but that's what they had. And now they've added back in headliners, but they added in quite a few. We heard about the Gibson Brothers, and of course, East Nash Grass was there, the Del McCoury Band was there. The list went on and on. So you're walking down the hallway of the hotel and you're likely to walk past every one of your favorite bluegrass musicians.
Speaking of that, one other encounter that I had was with Missy Raines at 2 a.m. in the lobby because she had a 5 a.m. flight. So they were headed to the airport. And she still had time to speak to a person who had a bass that was looking like any minute now the bridge was going to topple over. And she took the time in the middle of the night with probably no sleep to explain to this person how to fix his bass. And I just thought that was so indicative of not just the person that she is, but the type of people that get attracted to come to headline at this festival and in the bluegrass world.
100% agree. Before we go, we definitely want to shout out to the Boston Bluegrass Union, who organized and staged and shepherded us from room to room and made sure that there was water, urns in the hallway, and all that kind of stuff. Thank you very much to you all, and thanks to the staff of the hotel and the volunteers who helped make this a very, very special experience.
Yes, thank you for that.
Let me lose. I don't care how much I lose. If I lose $100 while I'm trying to win it out, my baby, she's got money all the time.
I'm really glad we got to hear from Ira. Interesting guy and quite fascinating insights into the history of the music. But what kind of amused me was how he unintentionally but inevitably wound up playing bass. It sounds like I don't want to stand too close to a bass because the next thing I know I'll be playing it. But it was a fun interview.
Yes. He's so deeply knowledgeable about so many things, not just the history of bluegrass. I love how he said that that's just how his mind works. But also really every time I'm near him, I learn something, and I learned something about my music. He has really great tips and ideas, and he's so committed to bluegrass music, and he's such a valuable asset to our community.
We'll put his contact information in the program notes if people would like to reach out directly. So, as always, please remember to follow us at Bluegrass Brooklyn, Brooklyn spelled BKLYN. And we really do want to hear from you. We really appreciate when we get suggestions or questions or topic ideas. Send an email to mike@bluegrassbrooklyn.com. So, Liz, anything else?
Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you around the Jam Circle.